I'm author Sarah A. Chrisman.
I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
And today we're discussing Boy Life on the Prairie by Hamlin Garland. Now this is a classic in American literature. Although I hesitate to say literature because all too often that has the connotations of snooty English majors saying, well, this symbolizes this and that symbolizes that. This is not that. This is part of America's origin story.
This is America's vernacular literature.
Yeah, although it's not as colloquial as a lot of vernacular. It's not as folksy as Mark Twain.
No.
It is the story. It's a true story. This is a man who grew up on the prairies, and he's writing about his own boyhood.
In the pioneer era.
A little later.
Okay.
A little later. These weren't the ones who cut down the forests.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few people on the prairie.
Right.
And reading this, it was really interesting to me to see how influential this was on the Wilder books, which came a little later. So the Little House books that were written by Laura Ingalls Wilder and her daughter Rose Wilder Lane. They took a lot from this book. And they sort of, the Wilders exaggerated things a bit, and they made it a little over the top.
They kind of mythologized things.
They definitely mythologized things, and they compressed the timeline so that in the Wilder books you have the whole settling of the American West from, virgin forest to thriving townships happening in one lifetime. Mm-hmm. And that's not actually how it happened. It was longer and more drawn out. And Hamlin Garland, in talking about his own boyhood, is showing one stage of that. He's showing the farming stage of that, which is a more realistic timeline, honestly, because it is his real experience. He moved around. His family was in Wisconsin for a while, and they were in Iowa for a while, and they were in the Dakotas for a while.
Which also paralleled the story in basically the Wilders books.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's another similarity between these two. And he does jump around a little in terms of which place he's talking about, and so you have to pay attention to that. But and he does paint a rosy glow over a lot of the farming life, even though he does talk about, going out in the frost and the cold to harvest the corn with chapped hands.
Of course.
There's still this rosy glow of nostalgia over it, because he's writing it 30 years after the experiences happened. Mm-hmm. He grew up on the prairie, he left to get educated, and he wound up as a journalist. Worked as a journalist for a number of years, and then 30 years later, after he'd left the prairie, he was looking back and having this nostalgia for his own childhood. Mm. And so he was writing it from that perspective. And when he goes back in the last chapter to see the scenes of his boyhood, he has seen what has fallen to the plow. He's seen the wildflowers are gone, and that all of the wild places he remembers where he hunted wolves and hunted prairie chickens have now become cornfields and become grain fields of various sorts. It was interesting to me that he specifically calls out the specific names of different wildflowers that he misses, that had been prevalent on the prairies when he was young, as part of that prairie that's lost. Now, the reason that was interesting to me is that a lot of the flowers he lists as having been lost are the flowers that have come back to the prairie now, which is cool, like the wild asters and the wild sunflowers.
Yeah. These are some of the sort of irrepressible ones that pop up along sort of the hedgerows and the ditches.
Well, the shame of it to me is that now, when in our part of Iowa, at least, in our county, when these old prairie flowers do come up at the sides of the highways, and the sunflowers come up and the wild asters come up, as soon as they come up and as soon as they start blooming, someone comes along with a riding lawnmower and just chops them all down. And it's just like a punch in the gut to me every time that happens, because when I see these beautiful wildflowers coming back, it's like this feeling of, wow, the prairie is still here. And then someone who has this idea of man's dominion over the earth being a God-given duty comes along and just cuts them all down.
More specifically, how a particular type of mown lawn is approximately 1 inch in length at all times is somehow the best symbol of civil duty and moral rightness. And that is a truly horrifying thing. Yes.
It's a shame. We try to keep our yard as wild as we can, and we try to encourage those old flowers, which our neighbors look askance at. They don't really like that, I think, because they think that all yards should be, lawn. Uniform, very short.
Imported Kentucky bluegrass.
Mowed daily.
Exactly.
But we like the prairie wildflowers. But anyhow, coming back to Hamlin Garland. It's a great story of America's founding and America's growth. Really,
it's more America's growth, yeah.
It's America's growth.
It's definitely the 19th century.
Oh, it's definitely the 19th century. So, in the 18th century, you had the founding of America. You had the 13 colonies. You had the founding fathers. This is the growth of America and the moving west. And you could even call it America's adolescence in a way.
Yeah.
If the 18th century was America's birth and babyhood, the 19th century was its adolescence. And which works really well because Hamlin Garland is talking about his own adolescence in these stories. And he's talking about the importance of the land to our country and the importance of agriculture to our nation. And I think it's a really important book for especially Americans to read, because it does help us understand what we are as a nation and where we came from, and how this country was built, honestly, and why it became what it did. And so I think that, to me, this should be part of the canon of books that all Americans should read. Even though I only just discovered it recently, I do think it's a very important and significant work. So I hope you check it out. Boy Life on the Prairie by Hamlin Garland. And we hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up. And remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading.